The lab was quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, as if the silence itself was a harbinger of something terrible. The air was thick with an unspoken tension, a sense of foreboding that seemed to seep into every corner of the room. Dr. Liang felt a chill despite the humid air. It was an odd sensation, as if the temperature had dropped several degrees in an instant. He rubbed his arms, trying to shake off the feeling, but it clung to him like a second skin. He walked past rows of flickering monitors, each displaying data from the enclosure beyond the reinforced glass. The screens showed various readings, temperature, humidity, movement, but they all seemed normal. Yet something felt off, as if the data was hiding a dark secret. It should have been bustling with activity. Scientists should have been moving about, discussing their findings and monitoring the experiments. The absence of his colleagues was like a gaping wound in the fabric of the lab's routine. Instead, there was only an unsettling stillness, the kind of stillness that makes you question your own senses, wondering if you're truly alone or if something is lurking just out of sight. He stopped, listening for any sound from the observation team usually stationed here. Nothing, not a whisper, not a footstep. The silence was deafening, amplifying his growing sense of dread. He pressed on, his unease growing. Each step felt heavier than the last, as if the air itself was trying to hold him back. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking his every move. The silence was broken by a high-pitched screech. It was a sound that seemed to pierce through the very fabric of reality, sending a jolt of fear straight to his core. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. It was cut short, replaced by a sickening crunch. The kind of sound that makes your stomach turn, that tells you something has gone horribly wrong. He felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Liang broke into a run, his heart pounding. He had to find out what was happening, had to get to the observation deck. His mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Reaching the observation deck, he stared in horror at the scene before him. It was worse than he could have imagined. The room was a scene of chaos and destruction. The security team lay mangled and lifeless, their bodies twisted at unnatural angles. Blood pooled on the floor, and the metallic scent of it filled the air. It was a massacre. Whatever did this was powerful, savage, the kind of force that could tear through metal and bone with ease. He shuddered at the thought of what kind of creature could cause such devastation. Liang's mind raced, trying to comprehend the carnage. How could this have happened? What had gone wrong? He felt a rising sense of panic, knowing that whatever did this could still be nearby. He had to alert someone, get help. His hands trembled as he reached for his phone, dialing the emergency number with shaking fingers. Every second felt like an eternity, but a low growl from within the enclosure froze him in his tracks. It was a sound that sent a chill down his spine, a primal noise that spoke of danger and death. He turned slowly, his heart in his throat. He turned slowly, dreading what he might see. The enclosure was empty. But it wasn't. Shadows moved within, and he could feel the presence of something watching him, something that had already tasted blood. Panic threatened to overwhelm him. His heart raced, pounding in his chest like a drum. The room seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in tighter with each passing second. He could feel the cold sweat forming on his brow, a stark contrast to the heat of his rising anxiety. He forced himself to breathe, to think. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slowly, deliberately, he calmed his racing heart. He knew he couldn't afford to lose control now, not when so much was at stake. Years of working with dangerous predators had taught him one thing: panic was deadly. He needed information. He needed to understand what had happened, and fast. His mind raced through the possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Accessing the security system, he rewound the last few hours of footage. His fingers flew over the keyboard, each keystroke bringing him closer to the truth. The screen flickered as the footage played back, revealing the events that had transpired. What he saw sent chills down his spine. The images on the screen were almost too much to bear. He watched in horror as the events unfolded, each frame more disturbing than the last. The team had been going about their routine checks when it happened. Everything seemed normal, mundane even, but then, in an instant, everything changed. One moment they were there, the next gone. It was as if they had vanished into thin air. No warning, no sign of struggle, just gone. But there was a flicker, a distortion in the air just before they vanished. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A ripple, like a stone thrown into a pond. Something moved there, something invisible. He could feel it. A presence just beyond the edge of perception. It was as if the air itself had come alive, shifting and moving in ways that defied explanation. He replayed the footage, focusing on the distortion. He needed to understand what he was seeing. He needed to find a pattern, a clue, anything that could explain the unexplainable. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a subtle shift in the air, a barely noticeable ripple that hinted at something more. A ripple in the air, like heat haze, but without the heat. It was a phenomenon he had seen before, but only under very specific conditions. He'd seen something similar before, in the early genetic manipulation trials. Those experiments had been groundbreaking, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. But they had also been dangerous, fraught with unforeseen consequences. But those projects were deemed too dangerous, shut down. Or so he thought. Now, it seemed, those old ghosts had come back to haunt him. The implications were staggering, and the danger all too real. He reviewed the project files, his blood turning to ice as he read. Project Phantom, a genetically engineered Tyrannosaurus rex, rendered invisible by manipulating its light-refracting properties. The project was deemed a failure, the creature too unstable. But the files ended abruptly, no record of termination. A cold realization washed over him. They hadn't terminated it, they'd lost control. The growl came again, closer this time. He could feel it, a tremor in the air, a pressure against his skin. The invisible predator was toying with him, stalking him. He had to get out, warn the others, but the exit was blocked, the creature standing between him and freedom. His only hope was to find a way to distract it, to make it visible, even for a moment. Section 4. Unveiling the experiments. His gaze fell upon the emergency sprinklers. Water. It might refract the light enough to reveal the creature's form. It was a long shot, but his only one. He sprinted towards the control panel, the air growing heavy with the creature's musky odor. He activated the sprinklers, the room instantly filling with a fine mist. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, through the haze, a shape began to materialize. It was enormous, a behemoth of muscle and teeth. The Tyrannosaurus rex let out a deafening roar, shaking the very foundations of the lab. Its eyes, cold and reptilian, locked onto Liang. It charged, its massive jaws snapping shut just inches from his face. Liang threw himself to the side, narrowly avoiding becoming the creature's next meal. Section 5. The Serpent's Role. He scrambled back, his mind racing. The lab was in chaos, alarms blaring and the air thick with tension. He could feel the cold sweat trickling down his back as he tried to make sense of the situation. The creature was out there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting to strike. He needed a weapon, something, anything to defend himself. His eyes darted around the room, searching for anything that could be used as a makeshift weapon. A broken chair leg, a shard of glass, anything that could give him a fighting chance. But nothing seemed adequate against the invisible terror that stalked him. But the creature was relentless, its invisibility making it nearly impossible to track. Then he remembered. The project files, the experiments, the desperate measures they had taken. There was one last hope, one last gamble that could turn the tide in his favor. Project Serpent, another experiment, a python genetically modified to grow to colossal size. It was designed to be the ultimate predator, a creature that could take down even the most fearsome of foes. The scientists had poured all their hopes into this one project, believing it to be their salvation. They'd planned to use it as a countermeasure, a predator to hunt the predator. The python was engineered to be faster, stronger, and more cunning than anything nature had ever produced. It was their last line of defense, their final trump card in a game of life and death. It was a desperate gamble. The python was just as dangerous, if not more so, than the creature it was meant to hunt. But in this moment of sheer terror, he knew he had no other choice. The fear in his eyes was palpable, but so was the determination. He had to act, and he had to act now. The python was just as dangerous, but it was his only chance. He stared at the massive serpent, its scales glistening under the harsh fluorescent lights. The creature was a marvel of genetic engineering, a testament to human ingenuity and desperation. But would it be enough to save him? He raced towards the holding cell, the ground trembling with the T-Rex's enraged roars. Each step felt like an eternity, the sound of his own heartbeat drowning out the chaos around him. He could feel the vibrations through the soles of his shoes, a constant reminder of the danger that loomed ever closer. The python lay coiled in the center of the enclosure, its massive body shimmering under the artificial lights. It was a sight to behold, a creature of myth brought to life through science. Its muscles rippled beneath its skin, a coiled spring ready to unleash its fury at a moment's notice. Its eyes, cold and calculating, met his. There was an intelligence there, a predatory cunning that sent a shiver down his spine. This was no ordinary snake, it was a hunter, a killer, and it was about to be unleashed. He knew he was taking a huge risk. The python could just as easily turn on him as it could on the creature. But in this moment of desperation, he had no other choice. It was a gamble he had to take, a risk he had to embrace. But at that moment, he had no other choice. His resolve hardened, and he steeled himself for what was to come. The fate of everyone in the lab, perhaps even the world, rested on his shoulders. He had to succeed. He had to unleash one monster to stop another. With a deep breath, he reached for the cage door, his hands trembling. The moment of truth had arrived. The serpent's role was about to begin.